Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her buddy Ayana Presley are actually trying to raise money for members of Antifa. Some Hollywood celebrities are taking heat for wanting to dox Trump contributors, and you'll never guess who the mayor of Chicago is actually blaming for the city's violence. All that and more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.
And God bless the United States of America.
All right, friends, welcome to the show. We are going to start with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and another squad member, Ayana Presley, because they are actually trying to raise money for Antifa. Now, over this Labor Day weekend, if you might have heard in the news, in Boston, there was a straight pride parade, and it was sponsored by a group called Super Happy Fun America. And of course, that brought out left-wing protesters like Antifa. And guess what? Violence occurred. Police were attacked. Arrests were made, just like you know that's going to happen when they show up. And yet the left is supporting them. They're actually trying to raise money for them. And we're going to get into the details. But first, I wanted to share a tweet from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez following the parade, because it just shows the left's embrace of diversity and inclusion and tolerance. Check out what she wrote. She said, "For men who are allegedly so proud of being straight, they seem to show real incompetence at attracting women to their event. Seems more like I struggle with masculinity parade to me. Hope they grow enough over the next year to support, join LGBTQ fam next, #pride. So that's wonderful. It's just wonderful that she shows so much inclusion to blast the parade rather than just letting it go, ignoring it, or saying, hey, that's a group of people too, but they can't do that because it's counter to their agenda. So, of course, again, like I said, with Antifa there, violence happened, and here's a report from the Daily Caller. It says, indeed, arrests did occur. 36 individuals were arrested Saturday with numerous charges of assault and battery on a police officer, and one juvenile arrested for assault and battery by means of a dangerous weapon, according to the Boston Herald. Reports from USA Today and the Herald indicate that many counter-protesters identified with Antifa, a far-left group that embraces violence to achieve political goals. One member of Antifa told the Herald, "We're covered in black so that when we attack these guys, we can't be prosecuted. They're fascist, 100%. How else are you going to get them to shut up?" he was quoted as saying. So that's what happened. And here is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's follow-up. She tweets, "One way to support the local LGBTQ community impacted by Boston's white supremacist parade? Contribute to the bail fund for activists who put themselves on the line protecting the Boston community. Any dollars left over go to Mass Bail Fund and Boston Glass." So she's actually trying to raise money for the people who are arrested, saying that they put their themselves on the line to protect the Boston community. It was a parade. No one was in danger of anything. And Ayana Presley came back and she tweeted this. She said, "Join me right now in making a contribution. Thank you to allies and accomplices who stood in the gap and laid their bodies on the line today in an affront to LGBTQ hate march. To everyone feeling unseen and vulnerable today, we got you. Equitable outrage. Our destinies and freedoms are tied." So Ayana Presley calls it a hate march, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calls it a white supremacist parade. All right. So the founder, the organizer of this group, this Super Happy Fun America, talked to the Daily Caller, and here's was his statement, his reaction to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's comments on it being a white supremacist parade. She said, "Not sure what parade or ceremony she watched over the weekend, but of the 12 speakers on our stage, 5 were African American, 4 were women, and 3 were African American women. This was not intentional on our behalf. They reached out to us in support of our movement. It happened organically. If you remove the 3 main organizers from the lineup, the majority of the speakers were African American. The only connections to racism are in the deluded minds of protesters who all repeat the same mantra against those whom they disagree with. Racist, fascist, Nazi, etc. are what detractors fall back on when their arguments are met with logical and rational pushback. They cannot win on the intellectual level, so they resort to name-calling. Those same people must have missed the Israeli flags and African American supporters in our group." And so it's not only, the organizers that are stunned by what they're saying. The Boston police certainly aren't happy. Ayanna Presley actually she comes from the state of Massachusetts, represents Massachusetts in the U.S. Congress. And here's a report from the Washington Times on the Boston police reaction to this fundraising for Antifa. It says, a Boston police union leader on Tuesday urged Representative Ayanna Presley to withdraw her support for activists arrested at an Antifa-fueled counter-protest, saying her support for a bail fund serves to encourage criminal and disruptive behavior. In an open letter to the Massachusetts Democrat, Boston Police Patrolmen's Association President Michael Leary said the so-called peaceful protesters injured 4 officers working security Saturday at the Straight Pride Parade, which drew more than 1,000 counter-demonstrators. I urge you to reconsider your support of the protest bail funds, the letter said. Instead, I hope you will make it clear to your supporters that you don't approve of violent behavior against public safety personnel. All right, so that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the leftists just resorting to violence and going crazy. Now, over on the other coast, you've got more craziness because Hollywood just doesn't get it. There is a fundraiser that's going to happen soon. It was reported by the Hollywood Reporter, and President Trump is going to be out there in Beverly Hills raising money for his campaign. And when news about that broke, when the Hollywood Reporter tweeted about it, Eric McCormick and Debra Messing from the show Will and Grace, they jumped on board. And here's what McCormick tweeted. He said, hey, THR, kindly report on everyone attending this event so the rest of us can be clear about who we don't want to work with. Thanks. And then Debra Messing, its co-host, added this. She said, please print a list of all attendees, please. The public has a right to know. And then she added to McCormick's tweet saying, co-signed. All right. So a few days later, because Messing is the real activist nut, she tweeted this. She says, I am proud to be a donor when I contribute to a campaign. I'm happy to be listed when I attend a fundraiser. I'm assuming anyone who donates to Trump's fundraiser feels the same. Why wouldn't they? All right, so these people are basically calling for a blacklist. All right, McCormick said, publish a list so I know who not to work with. All right, this is doxing. This is exactly what happened in Texas with Democrat Joaquin Castro. He published a list of Trump supporters in his area, Trump contributors. Some of them actually contributed to Castro's campaign. They were outraged, and the whole effort just blew up. The backlash was intense. There was outrage, there was criticism. And again, these people don't learn. They don't learn from Castro. They don't learn from history of McCarthyism, where Hollywood people were pushed out of jobs because of supposed relations with communists, and yet they're trying to do the exact same thing. Well, some people actually have spoken out. The outrage among conservatives is big, but Whoopi Goldberg on The View actually spoke out about this, which really surprised me, but here's what she said.
Your idea of who you don't want to work with is your personal business. Do not encourage people to print out lists, because the next list that comes out, your name will be on, and then people will be coming after you.
So those are good comments, but the people on the left never care about consequences. They do these things, assume no one's going to push back on them, and think they're going to get away with it. But when it's turned on them, then they just freak out. And here's more from Goldberg.
In this country, people can vote for who they want to. That is one of the great rights of this country. You don't have to like it, but we don't go after people because we don't like who they voted for. We don't go after them that way. We can talk about issues and stuff, but we don't print out lists.
So yes, financial contributions are public. They're recorded by the FEC. So you can dig in those if you want, but there's a difference between someone being interested in digging and it being published out there as an effort to divulge personal information like employer, age, things like that maybe people don't want out there, and in a way that says, hey, don't work with these people, which is exactly what McCormick said. So the intensity, not just from Goldberg, but from others, cause them to kind of rethink their position. And of course, they don't want to anger anybody. Everything's about peace and love. So they issued a clarification. And here's what McCormick Brody says. I want to be clear about my social media post from last week, which has been misinterpreted, of course, in a very upsetting way. I absolutely do not support blacklists. Yes, that's what he called for, or discrimination of any kind, as anyone who knows me would attest. I'd simply like to understand where Trump's major donations are coming from, which is a matter of public record. Yeah, so look it up. I'm holding myself responsible for making educated and informed decisions that I can morally and ethically stand by, and to do that, transparency is essential. It is transparent. It's called an FEC report. Look it up. But calling for listing of people so you know who not to work with is calling for a blacklist. That is doxing, and it's outrageous. And I'm glad Goldberg actually spoke up about it. And I wish more people on the left would do the same, because outrageous is outrageous, and they need to call him on this. So also over this Labor Day weekend, there was, of course, the shooting in Midland and Odessa. It started in Midland. Cops pulled this guy over. He just got fired. He was on a downhill spiral, shot at the cops, hijacked a mail truck, killed the postal worker, and then went around on his way to Odessa shooting people and killing people. It was tragic. Most news reports say it was a confirmed 7 dead and 24 injured. That was this weekend. He was quickly identified as a white male, AR-type weapon, and it's bad. There's no doubt about it. Look what else happened this weekend, all right? In Baltimore, you had 9 people shot, and I looked in the reports. None of them were identified by race or weapon, all right? Then you have Chicago, and here's a report from the Chicago Sun-Times. It says at least 43 people were shot, 8 fatally, in gun violence across Chicago over the Labor Day holiday weekend. Last Labor Day weekend drew 27 people shot across the city, 8 fatally. 4 victims were dead by the end of the weekend, while 4 others died of their injuries later. So in Chicago, just this past weekend, you had more killed, more injured than this Midland, Odessa tragedy that got all the national attention. In this news story, all these incidents are listed in Chicago, and no one is identified by race. No one is identified by the firearm used, okay? And it goes on. Detroit, guess what? More people were shot over the weekend. And then I found this interesting one. I'll put this up here. It says, man accidentally shoots himself twice in one night in Detroit. So how does that happen? I guess he is listed as the shooter twice and the victim. I mean, it's just nuts. But all of these things go on almost every weekend in these major cities controlled by Democrats, and no one talks about it. And in fact, Chicago mayor came out and blasted and addressed the city's violence. She blasted Republicans. She said Republicans were to blame, and it was just absolutely nuts. Here is her response to Ted Cruz blasting Chicago's violence and everything. And Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot tweeted this: 60% of illegal firearms recovered in Chicago come from outside Illinois, mostly from states dominated by coward Republicans like you who refuse to enact common sense gun legislation. Keep our name out of your mouth. All right, so look at that chart, okay? 60% of these illegal weapons are in Illinois. Another 20% are at the border of Chicago in Indiana. So most of the weapons come right next to you, which makes sense. And it does not explain the level of violence that occurs all the time that people will not address. And it just goes on and on, yet you have a white guy with a rifle, and that makes the news. So anyway, folks, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, and when you do, please hit that bell so you'll be notified, and we'll see you on Friday. I'm Bobby Eberle. It's a 13-minute news hour. Okay, friends, just a little reminder before you go, and no, this does not count against my 13 minutes. Please hit the subscribe button below and tell your friends. And if you happen to miss our last show, you can check it out right here. And also for great conservative news and commentary, please check out GOPUSA.com. All right, folks, we'll see you on the next show. Have a great day.